You're most welcome.
Welcome, everybody. Before we get into today's subject, we are basically putting in a bit of a trigger warning. We are here to talk about some things that we don't often talk about in our day-to-day realities, and there will be themes and discussions around serious mental health issues, people that are experiencing high levels of hidden distress and suicide ideation. Today's session has been put on in light of upcoming Suicide Prevention and Suicide Awareness Day, which will happen in a couple of days. So there are some heavy topics here. I want you to know that you are free to step away anytime if the content feels too overwhelming. You can take a break, you can switch your camera off, or simply pause if you need to. And at the end of this session, we will share a list of support resources and helplines should anyone find that they need additional support. I just wanted to make that clear because it's a slightly different topic than we normally discuss, and it's one that obviously has quite a lot of emotional weight attached to it. How many of you have ever put a smile on while feeling something very different inside, where you're projecting happiness to the outside world, where inside maybe the sun isn't shining? Yeah, seeing from the number of hands going up, that feels like many of us. I would actually be extremely surprised if all of you, in some way, shape, or form or fashion, couldn't put your hands up to that statement, because we'll all have those days where you have to show up, but you wish you could just hide away. How many of you believe that we all need spaces where it's safe to drop the mask and be real, to show up in authenticity, to show up as you are, not as you're expected to be? How many of you would agree with that statement? Yeah. And the sad thing is, many of us don't have those spaces where we can drop the mask and be real. We live in a world of overwhelm, of demand and pressure. We're expected to always be on and have it all together. And, you know, there is an opportunity just at the beginning of a conversation where someone approaches and, how are you? Well, you could be real and authentic. But I would say 99.999% of people, when they're asked, how are you, are giving their autopilot default response. They're not telling people how they are. They're just ticking a social nicety box. Most people say the same thing every time they're asked, how are you? And let's put this to the test. What is your standard default response to the question, how are you? Actual question, not rhetorical one. Feel free to jump on the mic, drop it in the chat.
You just say good.
Just say good, right? But what if you're not good? Would you still say good?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, good's, you know, middle of the road answer. A lot of people, and this is something I hear a lot, particularly in Britain, will say things like, I'm all right, can't complain, I'm not bad. Not bad? Yeah. Then what are you? Not good? What does that even mean? Can't complain? Well, you kind of just complain by saying you can't complain. You're looking for something to complain about. Someone said to me the other day, I was working on a project in Dubai. It was actually a few months ago now. I said, how are you? They said, I'm still alive. And I'm like, what, are you okay? You got serious illness or something? I thought they'd come down with cancer. And actually, it was just their standard default response. They just got used to saying, I'm alive, or surviving is another one that I'm hearing more and more.
Yeah.
So people aren't actually telling you how they are. They're just basically responding in the way that they normally do from autopilot. Yeah, Patricia's saying so, okay, thanks. How are you? Fine, thanks. Not too shabby. It's interesting, we're not too shabby. So you're a little bit shabby, not majorly shabby. And this, for me, is where people don't actually stop and open up. What if we all did tell people how we actually are? Like Lydia's saying, in your mind, you're saying, leave me alone, or I can't cope. And this is, as I said, like, we do find ourselves living in a world, in a society where it's usually not safe to express ourselves. But just for purposes of inclusion, how many of you have never put on a fake smile ever in your life and don't believe that there is a pressing need to find safe spaces where people can drop the mask? How many feel that this is not an issue or a concern or something that we need to be worried about or even talking about?
If only.
Yeah. If you have put your hand up for the last question, you are still very welcome. I'm glad that you're here because we do need to have these conversations, even with people that don't necessarily see things the same way as others do. This is how we learn and grow, not by attacking or dismissing people that have a different perspective to you, but by also coming together and exploring, discussing, and understanding each other better. So who are we? How many of you are attending one of our webinars for the very first time? How many of you are literally here for the first time with us? Amazing. If this is your first webinar with us, you are very, very welcome. We're very grateful to have you here. We've been doing this monthly for a very long time. The Stress Management Society is a non-profit organization that I set up 22 years ago with a vision of creating a happier, healthier, more resilient world. We do these sessions and put our resources together to be able to help and support people. We don't get paid for this. We are only able to do this through the generosity and the donations of people that attend. And why do I set this organization up? What is my reason for being here? I didn't set this organization up off the back of academic expertise or professional background. I set it up off the back of a life experience. The subject that we're here to talk about is something that is very close to my heart because it was literally the reason that I ended up on this path and why I do this work. Because in 2003, 22 years ago, I had a breakdown in my mid-20s, at the depths of which I attempted to end my own life. And when I'm here talking about the issue of suicide, I'm not just doing so in my professional capacity with my 22 years of experience of working in mental health. I'm also doing so off the back of first-hand experience of being there, of knowing what it's like when you get to the point where the emotional pain that you're in is so great that you don't want to be here anymore. And you're willing to turn the off switch on your life to end that emotional pain. And I'm actually very grateful I had that experience. The reason being, we wouldn't have gone on to do the work that we've done and as an organization reach more than 100 million people globally over the last 2 decades if I hadn't had that first-hand experience. So a big part of today's discussion is to share with you what I've learned along the way and how we can start creating positive changes. Because when I had that experience in 2003, what I didn't appreciate for a second is this issue is going to get much worse. And now in 2025, with all the advancements we've made in society, where we've got AI and cars that drive themselves and, you know, the ability to communicate across the world instantaneously, that despite all of these developments in human society, the main cause of death for a man under the age of 50 in Western society is what?
Loneliness.
Well, loneliness can't kill you, but it can definitely lead to something that will. What is the main cause of death for a man under the age of 50 in Western society? Hannah, you're right, it's suicide. What a lot of people don't appreciate is also now the main cause of death for 10 to 19-year-old on planet Earth. So one of the biggest killers of young people is suicide. And despite all the advancements we've made, that we've arrived at a point where this is the biggest issue that we're facing when it comes to losing young lives, yet it's still the one that we're most uncomfortable talking about. And the next 51 minutes, is an opportunity for us to create a safe space to talk about something that we don't often talk about. Because if we can have these conversations and start reaching people and making it safe for people to ask for help and seek support early enough, then hopefully we can start to redress the balance and reduce the number of people that we're losing unnecessarily. It is, Amanda, I agree with you, it's absolutely heartbreaking. And there, you know, we could go into many different reasons for this. In Britain, I know many of us are in the UK, and we also do have an international audience. The data from the NHS in 2019 suggested 18.5% of 16 to 24-year-olds were suffering with a mental health condition. the data announced this year, just 5 years later, is suggesting 25.8%. That's 1 in 4 young people in Britain is experiencing a mental health condition. That's a serious increase, 36% increase. This is getting much worse, not better. And obviously there's a lot of issues around the way that we handle COVID and the after effects of that, which has actually created a bigger issue than the one it was tackling. So part of this is, I don't believe we should be waiting for someone to fix this. We all have a responsibility to create the society and the world that we want to live in. And that's really, for me, what these sessions are about, is how can we all start to take action to make a difference. The session is being recorded just for people that aren't able to stay for a whole session, for people that weren't able to attend live to be able to catch up. If there is anything of a particularly sensitive nature that comes out, we will edit that out before sharing the recording. But I do want this to feel like a safe space for us to be able to open up and share. As I mentioned already, we can only continue doing this work through the generosity of the people that attend and support us. So if you are able to make even a very small donation, it allows us to continue to do this work and to put out the resources and to reach, help and support people. So in terms of how we run this session, we are doing our best to create an interactive virtual workshop. This is not a webinar. This is not me talking at you for the next hour. There will be lots of opportunities, as you've already experienced, for you to interact. You can jump on your mic. It's nice for us to be talking to real human beings, not initials on a screen. So if you can, please do put your cameras on, so we're actually having a conversation as if we were in a room together. I will ask a lot of questions. You probably already noticed that in the time we've been together. I ask a lot of questions. Get involved, jump in the chat. Lee, who opened up the session, give us a wave, Lee, for those that don't know who you are. My lovely co-pilot is going to be supporting, and if there's any specific comments that come up in the chat, she will also ensure that we bring that into the discussion. This isn't my session, it's not Lee's session, it's all of our sessions. So get involved. We want to hear from you. Ask your questions, share your experiences, disagree, whatever you need at any time. We're here to help and support you. We do have a few ground rules just to ensure this is a safe space. We have a short amount of time, let's make the most of it. Do your best to be present, participate. What you put in will determine what you take out. Be open, honest and respectful. If someone shares something you don't agree with, that's okay. They're entitled to their opinion as you're entitled to yours. Use I statements when you're speaking. So I believe, in my opinion, I think that. We're asking for this to be a safe space. So don't share other people's stories and experiences afterwards outside of this space without their express permission. And the only time confidentiality broken is if anything mentioned in this space that impacts your safety or the safety of others. So that's purely for safeguarding reasons. If you can, limit any other distractions that might take you out of this space, and have an open mind. Okay, so why do we smile when we're feeling very different inside? So smiling can express a lot, but also hide a lot. Why do we do this? What are the costs and the benefits? What's the reasons that that people will smile when it's not reflective of what their internal experience is?
In my experience, it's been because people don't understand when you're negative, I suppose. They don't. It's about relationships. For me, certainly about relationships, especially at work.
Okay, yeah. So it's because people don't understand. What else? Who else would like to share?
Maybe sometimes we just don't want to admit that we are feeling bad because of something, because that would be actually admitting that we have failed.
Yeah.
It's a really good point, Daniela. So we don't want to admit to others because that means you have to admit to yourself, right? So we don't want to see ourselves as weak or can't cope. Would you agree with that? And
yes.
Isn't it interesting that we find ourselves living in a world where you can't admit when you're struggling, where it's not okay to not be okay. We're expected to be okay all the time, right? And admitting that you're struggling, being vulnerable is seen as a sign of weakness. Would you guys agree with that?
Absolutely.
I don't agree with that. I think putting your hand up and being vulnerable is actually a sign of strength. It takes a stronger person to put the hand up and say, you know what, I'm struggling, I could use some help, than pretending like it's okay.
Again, I think it's in circumstances. I think for me personally, my issue was work. If I admitted that I was struggling, there would have been efforts to move me. I mean, sack me, which they did in the end. So yeah, I'm okay. It's okay to be what I can't remember the phrase now, but that actually saved my life.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was all right. It was suddenly you had permission to say you're not okay. I'd lost my job by then anyway. But so yeah, it all depends on circumstances. If you've got understanding people.
Yep. Absolutely. And as Tara's saying, people don't always give you the space to be vulnerable because we're so busy. We don't have the time or the capacity. People might think you're a failure or weak or pathetic. And this is a challenge because if that's the case, particularly in a world where we still have phrases like grown men don't cry and pull your socks up and soldier on and just get on with it, where it's seen as a weakness, which means that you're not going to know there's a problem until it's too late. Does that make sense? Till someone's already in a place where there is a potential risk of harm to themselves or maybe to others. We need to change that, because how can we possibly reach people early enough to get them the help they need if people can't even open up and admit that they're struggling? And who'd like to share examples of situations where you've had to put a smile on your face, where you've had to make out that everything's okay? Also, Lydia, I've noticed you've got your hand up. If you've got a point to share, feel free to jump in. No worries. So, can anyone think of an example or a situation where you've had to put a smile on your face? You've had to pull your socks up and get on with it? Go for it, Tara.
There's two sides to this.
Right.
I think in front of children. And the reason why I say there are two sides to that, because I'm a believer of them seeing that it's okay to not be okay, and therefore them seeing you in a vulnerable position isn't a bad thing. But sometimes there are obviously circumstances where that isn't going to work, and therefore you do have to put on a strong front to them to help them to be able to move forwards. An example of that is my daughter this year admitted to self-harming, and that wasn't okay, but that was okay in the context of having conversations. But my husband didn't know how to deal with that, and therefore he was really angry about it. And whilst not at that point in time, it's okay for her to understand that that had an impact on us. There and then was not the appropriate time for her to have to deal with how it made us feel, as well as how she was already feeling about it, if that makes sense.
No, 100%. And I could very much relate to that, Melissa. I'm going to come to you in just a second. There are times where, I've been struggling with something, but I've put a smile on it and pretended like everything's okay, because expressing it to my partner could have then added load to her, and I know she's already struggling. And then there's two of us struggling, and then we're kind of triggering each other as a result of it. So it felt safer for me at times just to keep it to myself and make out that everything's okay. That's not the great long-term answer, but sometimes we consider short-term gain, but that creates long-term pain. Does that make sense? The reverse is short-term pain, where you have to deal with it in the moment, but long-term gain because you get the support that you need. But I appreciate there are times where we may do that. We all do that. And I put my hand up to say I've been there as well. Thank you, Tara. Melissa, go for it.
Hi, everyone. this is an interesting one for me, because I would say in my personal life, within my family and my friends, they would always say that I've got a face that doesn't tell any lies. And my response to how are you typically is the truth. Work is different though. So at work, I put on the front. I also work by myself. I deliver sessions for young people. So when I haven't been in the mood, I've had to force it, because it's my job to create that welcoming environment for them that makes them want to continue engaging with us. But at work, I was thinking recently about when I was trying to express to my line manager how overwhelmed I was, how burnt out I was. I kind of just admitted it to myself. And there was a moment when we were talking, I was feeling emotional, and I kind of looked at who I was speaking to, and really had to hold it down. And I wish it wasn't like that, because the result is that I didn't really get much support from her, got it from other people. But yeah, work is that situation where, like others have said, you just got to put on that face and carry on, otherwise they're going to look at you sideways, or you're seen as antisocial or rude.
Yeah. And thank you, Melissa. I appreciate you being open and vulnerable. And I think this for me is one of the key points here. Is I'm not expecting us to open up and express ourselves to everyone, but we all do need a safe space. We do need someone that we can turn to for support. And particularly in the workplace, it might not be everyone, but there's got to be at least one person at work that you can turn to. CIPD research has suggested that people that have a workplace best friend, you know, sometimes we joke and call them the work wife or the work husband or whatever, but people have that trusted confidant at work, there's something like 70% less likely to suffer from a mental health condition. I can't remember the exact statistic, but it's between 60 and 70%. Why is that? Because it's someone that understands what it's like to be you. You can talk to your friends and family outside of work, but they may not understand what it's like to be in that working environment, know the characters and situations you need to deal with. They may not be able to relate and empathize with your experience in a way that somebody that's in that environment can. Does that make sense? So it's really important that, given that we spend so much time at work, that we have people we can trust, open up to, talk to, and rely on in the workplace. And this is really where, as I said, that's the one community that you're guaranteed to be a part of. Let's say I'm from London and I traveled to Aberdeen for a 6-month work assignment, and I don't know anyone in Aberdeen, right? Like, the only community I'll have is the people that are in that workplace that I'm working at, if that makes sense. If I don't have people I can connect with, I could feel extremely lonely, isolated, and disconnected, because I'm far away from my friends and family. So my point here is that every organization, every workplace should be working to develop a culture where people feel engaged and a part of something, because through that creates the safety where people can open up and express themselves. Go for it, Tara.
In my old job, not my current job, we used to have, and I can't remember the actual term for them, but like the equivalent of a first aider. They were like a mental health first aider, so therefore they were that safe space to go and speak to some. I think they were all based within HR, but yeah, they were sort of a point that you could just go to if obviously there was something specifically in that context, which in my current role, I don't believe there is anything similar in that organisation. But I thought at the time I didn't really understand the logic of it. And then a friend of mine was really struggling at work, and I recommended she went to speak to them. And I think she found them really helpful in that context, because it was that safe space outside of her team and everything for her to be able to explain how she was feeling, etc., to be able to take that forward.
Absolutely. One of our flagship programs is the Mental Health Champions program, which is very much that, to create a peer-to-peer support network where we've got colleagues that are trained to not to provide advice, guidance, counselling, but just to listen and provide an ear. And we all need someone every so often that can listen and give you an ear. Because actually just being able to talk and express and get things off your chest can be one of the most valuable things. But many of us don't get that space, and you don't actually take action until it's already too late. Like a lot of people, when they have a serious health condition, let's say you have a heart attack or cancer, all of a sudden we get very serious about looking after our health if we want to live. Does that make sense? And you'll take your health much more seriously. It's also very similar with mental health, that we take action and we tend to do something about it when it's got really bad. But what about if we took action early enough to prevent it from becoming a more serious issue? And part of that is where you have the support and the safety to be able to ask for help and seek out support when you need it. And part of this is we all need to get better at recognizing when people maybe aren't being open and authentic, and to be able to understand how we can make more meaningful inquiries to create that safety for them to open up. So this is really kind of the next point for us to explore. How many of you have ever noticed when you're talking to someone that they might be smiling, but something inside you says, I don't buy it. You know, I'm not believing this. There's something else there. And you know, someone saying, "Oh, everything's fine, I'm doing great," and you're like, "Yeah, tell me more." Emily, go for it. You put your hand up. So, give me the example that came to mind when you put your hand up.
It's something that I personally notice more so in my own partner, because obviously when you live with somebody, you know them better, but you can tell because someone's smile, it doesn't go up to their eyes. And if you're looking at somebody's eyes, I feel like it's pretty obvious if the smile is genuine or not. And it's quite horrible to see, because I feel like we've all felt like that. You know, and it's hard because people might not always want to speak about what it is because they're trying to hide what the issue is. So they may not actually want to discuss it, but you can see that they're in pain. And I find that quite hard.
Absolutely. And Emily, you're right. And what I'm here to suggest is we can at least create the opportunity and the safety for them to open up. And this isn't just gut instinct. A lot of people think, oh, it's my intuition, it's gut instinct. There's actually things that you are picking up at a subconscious level, which is allowing you to recognize the incongruence. Does that make sense? That your words are telling me something, but I'm receiving other information which is making me doubt you. It's kind of like when someone's lying and you kind of know they're lying, but you might not have the clear evidence as to why, but inside it's like, I don't buy it. Does that make sense? I'm going to share something with you that will allow you to see beyond the facade. And then the next step is, well, how can we create the space and encourage them to open up? Because that's really all I want to cover today, is if we start to reach more people and create the safety for people to open up, maybe we can start to address these issues long before they become a more serious concern. And Emily, I've just noticed your comment in the chat. I'm really sorry to hear that you recently had a miscarriage. I hope you're getting the support that you need to recover.
Now, thank you, Neil.
Emily, it's actually a really good example for what we're talking about, if that's okay with you, that until if this was your first miscarriage, you may not be aware that actually, I think it's 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage. It's the really common. You know, anyone that's had or has tried to have children will recognize how much of a common experience this is. But we don't talk about it. So until you've had an experience like this, you don't recognize how common it is. And then you start speaking to your friends and family. Oh, yeah, we had one. And you know, for my ex, we had 6 miscarriages. And it's not until we had those experiences did I recognize how many people have been through that. But it shouldn't be until you've had the experience till we start talking about it and you recognize how big of an issue it is. Because if you knew that in advance, you might have been able to ensure that you get the support and you're able to navigate that in a different way rather than figuring that out after the fact. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. That's really good. I think that would be something, I feel like it should be something that's sort of discussed and potentially there's a policy on for like most workplaces because it is so common.
Absolutely. But is this not also just a really wonderful parallel for the issue that we're here to talk about, which is suicide, which is a ridiculously common issue. 1 person on the planet dies every 40 seconds because of suicide. I know when you open up the news and pick up a newspaper and scroll through social media, you're going to see, particularly at the moment, images of war and bombs and people dying in wars and war zones and murders and homicide. That's what the news cycles are filled with, right? And those are tragic and horrible. And I'm not dismissing the people that suffer and die as a result of war and human violence. But if you add all the human violence, not just wars, but murders, homicides, etc., totals about 400,000 people every single year that die of all human violence on the planet. It's a lot of people. What a lot of people would be shocked to learn is about 720,000 people that die of suicide every year. But when you scroll through social media and you read the news, and you can fact check these numbers, I'm not making them up, are you getting a proportional representation of the amount of people that are dying as a result of their own hand or are dying from human acts of violence? Does that make sense? Because it's twice as many. Are we having twice as many stories and news articles about suicide as we are about the things that we do hear about? So this is a really strange paradox for me. We got a huge issue, but because we don't talk about it, most people, like the issue we've just mentioned, Emily, like miscarriage, don't even know how big of a concern it is, don't know how many people it's impacting. And we tend to take action as a society against the things that we talk about. Really what we stand for is getting people talking about an issue that is one of the biggest issues we're facing on the planet, because when we talk about it, we empower ourselves to take action and to do something about it. And I've stopped waiting for people in positions of authority to make those decisions. It's up to all of us. We want to create a world that's better for all of us, where we're able to reach people and show love, compassion, and empathy, and to create the safety for people to ask for help. Well, don't wait for someone else to do it. How are you going to be a part of the solution? And part of that is, yes, let's get comfortable having uncomfortable conversations. And as Lee said earlier in the chat, make it okay to not be okay. Because right now, that's not the world we live in. Everybody wants the Instagram pitch perfect lifestyle so they can put up these images and look how happy I am. But that's not what reality is like. So, yes, so part of this is to be able to recognize when someone's smiling, but they're not, it doesn't match. I'm going to teach you a very simple technique, and this is really the main part of today's discussion, something for you to take away. And I just want to, before we get to that, also recognize why we don't look beyond the smile. So why is it that we miss those signs? What is the reason that we're not picking up when someone's struggling? Sometimes the signs can be relatively obvious. Go for it, Bev.
I think it's fear of opening a box and not being able to put the lid on it again, and not being able to get the support that the individual actually needs because of the lack of resources we've got.
Absolutely. So it could be that we don't know how to deal with it. We're scared of getting it wrong. We don't have the time, energy, or capacity. It's out of fear. There's a whole range of reasons that people struggle to open up these dialogues, because, let's be honest, even now in 2025, how many of you would agree there's still a huge amount of guilt, shame, and stigma associated with mental health?
Oh, a hell of a lot.
Yeah. How many of you would agree that people that struggle with their mental health face discrimination? Okay, I'm seeing lots of you nodding and putting your hands up. But isn't it interesting when it comes to other issues of diversity and inclusivity, like race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, we have campaigns, right? To encourage us to be more inclusive. I don't see the same level of campaigning going on with mental health, because people do face discrimination every single day when they struggle with their mental health. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
You could be passed up for job promotions. It could impact your social life. I remember when there's times I've been struggling, maybe I wouldn't get invited to parties and social events because you might be a bit of a downer. Do you know what I mean? It could impact relationships. It does affect your day-to-day life, and you will potentially face discrimination because we haven't yet got to the point where we're even comfortable talking about it, let alone reaching to people. And this is really, as I said, something that really does need to be addressed. Because even if you pick up the signs, some people will ignore it. You know, the person that's come to work after a period off with depression, actually, there's a lot of people that share these experiences. People give them a wide berth because they don't know what to say, so it's easier to ignore and avoid. So you can see how people would pretend like everything's okay until it's not. And this is really where, as I said, the thing that I'd like to share with you today is something that for me changed the way that I was able to connect with people. It's very simple. It's listening with our ears, our eyes, and our heart. And it sounds really simple.
It's not.
But it's actually a really powerful technique. So listening with the ears, well, it should be obvious. What do you think I mean by listening with the ears? It should be pretty obvious. And what are we listening to?
Listening to not what's being said.
So listening to what's being said, but how is that
Not
message being?
what's being said.
Not what's being said. Yeah, that's true as well. So obviously the words that someone is sharing is something that you can listen to, but what else are you going to hear beyond just the words itself?
Tone, the tone of their voice.
Yeah, tone, volume, pitch, power, intonalities, intonations, should I say. Now, if someone is in a compromised state, what might happen to the volume of their voice?
Mine rises.
What might you notice about the volume, tone, pitch, power of their voice?
I either can't speak or I speak too fast and too loud.
Absolutely. Now, here's the key thing. There's nothing in particular you can say this means that they're compromised. Does that make sense? What you're looking for is the change in their normal ways of communicating. If someone's normally a quiet character and all of a sudden they become loud and aggressive, it's like, what's behind that change? I'm not suggesting it's because their mental health is compromised, but that could be a contributing factor. I'm normally quite a loud person. And I remember there was a time not that long ago where for the first time I can remember in my life, where my partner said to me, "Speak up, I can't hear you." I was like, that's never happened before. But in that moment, I was a little bit uncomfortable with. So I had a change to my normal approach. Does that make sense? I'm normally quite loud and I'm really good at projecting my voice. But there was a moment something changed and there was something behind that. If someone normally speaks quite, with a good pace and maybe a little bit slow, and they're now starting to speak quickly, what's led to that change? Does that make sense? And this is really where our observation skills is not to look for this means that someone is stressed or upset or struggling with mental health, but if there is a change, is there any other information that's suggesting that there could be cause for concern? Now, as I said, we're looking at it with not just our ears, but also with our eyes. What messages are your eyes going to hear? If you're listening with your eyes, what are your eyes going to hear?
Body language.
Okay. Yeah. And what kind of things specifically?
Arms folded, defensive.
Could be. Yeah. What else? What else might your eyes hear? Yeah, Michael's saying shuffling. Yeah, there's like fidgeting, lack of eye contact. Yeah, tearful, shoulders slumped, bags on their eyes maybe. Do you agree that the way someone is using their body and their body language will give you a good sense of where they're at?
Sometimes.
And what about listening with your heart? What does that mean? How do you listen with your heart? So, Emily, you said having empathy, but how do we have empathy? I think Michael said that as well. Two Michaels, Michael Watkins, Michael Kilroy.
For me, I just sort of think, if I see somebody that's feeling a certain way, I'd think about how it would feel if it was me feeling that way, and what that might feel like myself.
So you're feeling what they're feeling inside you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
So, Emily, have you ever walked into a room where there's some people that have been having a laugh and a giggle, and you walk in and everybody kind of stops giggling? But you can tell, you can feel like, what are you guys laughing at? They're not laughing right now, but you can feel that within yourself, right? Equally, have you ever walked into a room where people may have had an argument or someone might be really upset and you walk in and they're like, pretend like everything's okay, or the argument stops, but you can feel it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
That's not woo-woo. That's we can literally, that's not gut instinct or intuition. Energetically, you can feel that within yourself. You know, they even have a phrase like you can cut the atmosphere with a knife. It's like you're feeling something, you're feeling the human bioenergetic field. What I'm saying is if we sit in presence, when you're talking to someone, you get a sense of where they're really at. And I'm not just going to say these things to you. We're going to actually prove this with a demonstration to show you how quickly and easily you can really get a sense of where somebody is. So in a minute, I'm just going to minimize this slide deck for a moment. And I'd like one of you to volunteer. Now, in order to volunteer for this exercise, you will need to put your camera on because it doesn't work if we can't see you. So any of you who've got your camera on that feel comfortable volunteer for this exercise, let me know, and we'll show you how quickly and easily you can get a sense of where someone is just by being fully present. So who would like to volunteer for this exercise? It's not painful, I promise. Any volunteers in the house?
I will.
Fantastic. Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate that. So Lee, can you do me a favor and spotlight Melissa so we can all see her? Melissa, are you able to turn your camera on?
It is on.
It's on.
Oh, okay, great. Fantastic. Sorry, I couldn't see it. Okay, so I am going to thank you, Lee. So I'm going to ask you a question. The first time I ask you the question, I want you to give me your standard default response to that question, right? So just what you would normally say. Everybody else, I'm going to ask you to observe, right? And I'm not going to ask you just to observe with your eyes or to listen to what's going on, but also to feel inside. And just to see when we get to the point where we're having a bit more of an authentic dialogue. So, Melissa, I'm about to ask you a question you've heard probably 1,000,000 times in your life. And I want you to give me your normal standard default response to the question. And the question is, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Wonderful. Thanks for asking. Okay. What we've now all witnessed is a completely pointless exchange of information. We've learned nothing about Melissa or Neil. Would you agree with that?
Mm.
Did any of you notice Melissa checked in with herself, got a sense of how she's doing and reported back accordingly? Or how many of you felt Melissa was operating on autopilot and just regurgitated a response? What are your thoughts?
Autopilot.
Autopilot, right? How many would agree autopilot? I'm with you on that. Okay, I'm going to ask the question again. So let's just say we did the pointless exchange of information, but I continued, I persisted. And my follow-up question was, thanks, Melissa, but how are you really?
That's an interesting question. If you're asking me from a work perspective, then I'm good. If you're asking in a life perspective, then I'm actually really excited. I've got some exciting things that I'm working on at the weekends, and I'm buzzing off a weekend spent doing that.
Fantastic. Thank you. Now, here's the thing. I'm not expecting that everyone we talk to is going to have challenges or struggles. But the first time what we got is we ticked a box. The second time, do you agree we got a lot more information?
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll come to that in a second. Melissa, may I ask, what's the reason you offered me a very different answer the second time around?
When we started the activity, I was thinking it depends on who I'm speaking to, because at work it's autopilot. All good, how are you? Yeah, and I don't really delve into personal stuff very often.
Okay, no, I
and
appreciate that.
I'm joining this call on my work device during work time.
And absolutely. Also, you've got almost 100 random strangers on a call. So Yeah, so it would be understandable for you to give a default response, but it comes back to the same question. What's the reason you gave a different response the second time around?
Because that's the truth, and because, yeah, that's the truth.
And again, I'm not disputing that that's the truth. I actually agree with you, and I'm going to go into in a second for everybody else's benefit why I feel that that was the truth as well. But it still comes back to that question: what's the reason you gave me a different response the second time around?
It felt safer.
Okay,
Yes.
it felt safer. And
Analogy.
I'm going to hazard a guess here. The fact that I chose to ask again, was that essentially received by you as, oh, he actually does want to know who I am, how I am even?
Yeah, under the context of the activity that we're doing.
Yeah.
It's an activity, so, but yeah, and someone else put it because it shows more interest when someone says, but how are you really?
Yeah. I'm not going to take any credit for this. This was a campaign we were involved with several years ago by an organization called A Time to Talk, and they ran a campaign called #AskTwice. Because the vast majority of people, even with no context, not in a training environment or a webinar or a workshop or a call like this, you go up to a random stranger and you ask them, how are you? And you follow up with, no, how are you really? Or I'd really love to know how you are. I think the vast majority of people, second time around, will give you more information, will give you more context, because you're saying to them, I really do care. I really do want to know how you are. Does that make sense? So the first part of it is, we created the safety for Melissa to open up and share more information. But what did we observe differently the second time round? How do you know beyond the words, because the words was obviously giving us a lot more information, but what did your eyes hear to suggest, actually, Melissa's taken the time to check in with herself and she's being authentic? And there was a very rich response if you were listening carefully with your eyes. What did your eyes hear?
She paused and looked kind of in a certain way, which would suggest she's kind of retrieving information and thinking about it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate that, Dion. You're right. She stopped. She actually stopped and pondered, how am I doing? Does that make sense? The first time we didn't see that. She actually asked the question of herself. And then what did she do? How do we know she was looking for the answer? Because she was literally looking for the answer. Where's the answer? How am I doing? Her eyes were literally looking for the response to my question. Human beings have this strange habit that when we are looking for information that we're not throwing out on autopilot, your eyes will start to look for it. And you don't need to believe me on this. Test this for yourself. Ask someone a question they need to stop and think about, and you'll see their eyes, even if it's just a glance upwards, you'll notice the eyes always have it. Does that make sense? That's where the phrase "the eyes have it" comes from. I actually first learned about these techniques before I read about NLP and before I studied NLP from a poker player. And they were successful because they were really good at observing other people's behaviors and knowing what was going on in their mind. And just a slight shift in the way they were moving their eyes could have suggested excitement, like, I've got a good hand. Does that make sense? What I'm saying to you is, if we are present, which is so hard in modern society, you'll pick those things up, because Melissa made it easy for us. It was so obvious that she was taking the time to stop and listen. So do we see that the eyes, which we're not basically using the visual information as well as we could, gave us a lot of information, much more than the words itself? How many would agree with me on that? Okay, next thing, your heart. Who would like to tell me about what your heart heard? Go for it, Helen. Or anyone? What messages did your heart hear the second time Melissa told us how she was doing? Because she obviously told us she was excited, she was uplifted, she was in a good space. If your heart was listening to the message, what did your heart hear? Okay, Emily, you said you didn't hear it, you felt it. But what is it that you felt? Patricia's saying positive energy, flow. Emily felt a bit of excitement. Natalie felt a bit of positive energy. So would I be correct in saying when Melissa was talking about her excitement and her enthusiasm about where she's at now, if you weren't able to hear with your ears, but you just were able to feel it inside, the energy, how many would have felt like the positive energy coming from her when she was sharing? Yeah. It's 3 sensory inputs, 3 sources of information that gave us a really good sense of where Melissa is. I was able to build a connection. The word empathy quite literally means putting yourself in someone else's shoes, being able to see the world through someone else's perspective. How many of you felt that we were able to empathize with Melissa when she was sharing how she was doing? Bear in mind, empathy isn't always when someone's in a bad place. That's a mistake. Empathy is just putting yourself in someone else's shoes, regardless whether it's a good or a bad thing. And what I'm saying is, if we stop and we're present and we listen fully with our eyes, our ears, and our heart, you'll get a sense of where someone is. And that's where, when we know where someone is, we can give them the space to be able to express themselves. So I'm going to make a statement. It's better to fix and solve someone's challenges than simply to listen. Let's discuss that for a moment, because I appreciate we live in a world where when there's a problem, how do we fix it? How do we solve it? And we're all very solution and focused and wanting to solve problems. If we want to be there for people, is that the approach that we should take?
I think it often comes from a place of care.
Of course.
But it isn't always received in that way, and actually just to listen and sit with somebody if they're distressed is really powerful and sends a more powerful message than, oh, well, have you tried this or have you done this?
So, Dion, just want to make sure I heard this correctly. So you're saying it's actually better to listen than not to fix and solve. So you're disagreeing with that statement?
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
But I'm saying that people that normally come with that have the best of intentions, so it's not like a wrong thing to think or to say, but I think it's better to listen and just sit with.
Absolutely, and I think this is a really interesting point there. So Natalie Williams, you said it's better to listen and make them feel heard than try and solve for themselves, but it's difficult to try not to solve it. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that? What's the reason it's difficult not to try and solve it from your perspective?
Hi.
Hi.
I feel like, I don't know, like I'm a helper. So I always want to help people. I always want to make things better if I can. But really, often people know the answer for themselves and they just actually want someone to listen to them. So I find it hard as a mother, as a friend, as a daughter, or whatever, to not offer my opinions on how they might solve it. Or, as you said, have you tried this? Have you done that? But I know that it's better to listen and see if they can come to their own conclusions, or ask them, do they actually want me to offer my solutions? But I just find it hard to keep it to myself.
Absolutely. But then you're also taking some pressure on. You're taking on a responsibility which is not yours to take on. Does that make sense? Our job is to provide a shoulder and an ear and ask questions. If you are in empathy, all you're doing is asking questions. If you're in sympathy, which is showing pity and sorrow for people, you're making statements. Oh, it's going to be all right. Oh, that must be awful. Have you tried this? Be strong. Everything's going to be fine. You'll get through this. Have you noticed that sympathy is statements? Empathy is, tell me more about that. How are you experiencing this? How is this impacting you? What do you need? How can I support you? And actually, if someone needs help and support, create an opportunity for them to ask for it rather than offering it. Because maybe that person just wants to be heard. Maybe they're not ready for solutions yet. And actually, if you're offering solutions inadvertently with the best intentions, you've made it about you, not about them. Does that make sense? Because that's what you think is best for them. And even if you're right, it has to be on their terms. Does that make sense? What's the phrase? You can bring a horse to water, you can't make it drink. You could be telling someone that's the best advice in the world, absolutely the perfect thing for them to do. If they're not ready for it and you're forcing on them, you might actually have the reverse effect and they go into resistance. Does that make sense? Those of you who have children will know what I'm talking about when you're trying to get a kid to do something and it's in their best interest, but actually the more you want them to do it, the less likely they are to do it. So actually put them in control. So that was a purposely provocative statement. It is not better to fix and solve. It's better to be there, offer a shoulder and an ear, listen, be there for them, and ask the right questions. Those questions are meaningful inquiries about their welfare and well-being. Like, how are you? How are you really? How are you doing on a scale of 16 to 24? Not 1 to 10, because everybody says 7, right? It's the easy default response. But ask them a random question that they have to stop and think about, that break the autopilot. But more importantly, then getting to questions like, how can I be there for you? What support do you need? So you're inviting them to ask for the ways that they can get the help and support they need. So my biggest challenge, we had a huge subject on a tiny amount of time, but I want you all to think about one small action you can take this week. How many of you are willing to ask twice? The next time you speak to someone and you start a conversation with a friend, a family member, a colleague, a neighbor, a random person you bump into in the street, ask them, how are you? And then follow it up with, how are you really? And be present, listen with your eyes, ears, and heart. Be aware of the information that you're picking up. And you never know, you might just create the safety and the space for someone to open up. If someone's compromised, they've had a tough time, they live in a world where it's easy and comfortable, expected for you to say, no, everything's okay. But just today, when speaking to Melissa, Emily was brave enough to be vulnerable, has expressed something that's going on in their world, which in part of your day-to-day conversations. Would you have expressed that? It's because we created the safety for you to do so. Now here's a pay it forward. How can you create the safety for someone else to do so? You've experienced that with basically 100 people that probably don't know each other or never met before, have come together and created a safe space for us to open up and share and have a conversation we don't regularly have. How can you do that for 1 or 2 people every day and be the difference for that person? Particularly in the world we find ourselves in now, there's a lot of people that are struggling, and the world can be a challenging and scary place for many people because of everything that's going on. So be present, use your eyes, your ears, and your heart, and invite people to open up. And if they're struggling, just at least 1 word to describe how you're doing. And that's something I'm going to ask you all to do. If you haven't had a chance to check in or really get involved in today's discussion, before you leave, put in 1 or 2 words around how you're feeling right now. In this safe space, be able to express yourself, because we need to get better at this, particularly with young people that really do struggle to express themselves. And we're having, as I said, an issue that is getting worse. In addition to this, we have got a bunch of free resources. My lovely colleague Lee will put the link into the chat. I believe there's some resources that have been created to support this session as well. So you can check that out on our website. As I said, the link will go into the chat very, very shortly. We also have our corporate forum. If you are a decision maker or someone that's responsible for workplace well-being, we have a forum which is kind of a community of people that come together every couple of months to talk about issues that are related to the workplace. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up on our website. Again, Lee will put the link into the chat there. And it will also be in the newsletter, which will go out tomorrow, which will have all the information about today's session and the recording. If you need to share this with anyone else, you'll be able to do so. We have a newsletter. Most of you would have found us because of our newsletter. We send that out once every couple of weeks. There's lots of really useful and valuable information that we share on there. If you recommended this session or you don't get our newsletter, you can sign up for it on our website. Again, the link will drop into the chat, and we'll you'll be able to then stay in touch with us on a more regular basis. We have a Mental Health Champions program, which I referred to at the beginning of the session. There is a 50% discount for those that attend our webinars. So this is basically the modern day equivalent of mental health first aid, not dismissing mental health first aid, but it's something we developed to be more fitting for the world we find ourselves in today. It's normally £497, but if you sign up using the code in the message there, it's only £248. So you save 50% from that one. We've got an online training program. Again, we'll send information of that in the message tomorrow as well. If you like this session today, if you found it useful, beneficial, please leave us a review on Google. So if you just search us on Google, Session of Stress Management Society, your reviews mean that more people will find us and more people can benefit from these sessions. And we'll always do our best to continue doing them free of charge so we can reach as many people as possible and money doesn't become a barrier. If you need any support regarding things that are going on in your workplace, if you want to review any of the services that you've got in place, feel free to reach out. And for those that do need additional support, there's some information there on the screen. You can contact Samaritans if you're really struggling or know someone that's struggling. If you're from slightly older, you can contact Silverline. There's Mind, and then there's also the campaign against living miserably. If you're from outside the UK, I know we have a lot of people outside of the UK that join our calls. Drop us a message and we can help you to connect with resources in your local region. And just before we finish, I'm going to stay on for the next few minutes. If anyone's got any final questions, comments, feedback, anything you want to discuss or share, I am happy to hang out for the next few minutes to continue the conversation. So yeah, if you've got questions, comments, or anything you want to discuss, jump in the chat or on your mic. I'm happy to stay on. But otherwise, if you are jumping off, hopefully see you next month. Next month, we have the session for World Mental Health Day. That's on the 10th of October. And it's not 2 to 3 actually, it's 1 to 2, and that's around sort of how we can cope with sort of the challenges around mental health that we're experiencing in the world today. So yeah, I look forward to seeing you on that call. Wonderful, thank you all for attending. It's been lovely to have you here, and as I said, love to hear your final questions and comments.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.